Emily Carter found the brown envelope on a Thursday night in late November. When Portland was raining in the way only Portland could rain, not loudly, not violently, just steadily, coldly, clinging to everything like a sad thought that refused to leave a person's mind. Second chapter, her little bookstore and cafe, had been closed for almost an hour. The wooden chairs were turned upside down on the tables. The espresso machine was still faintly warm behind the counter, and the smell of cold coffee mixed with old paper, leather covers, floor wax, and a trace of cinnamon left from the batch of muffins that had not sold that afternoon. Beyond the glass door, the streetlights stretched into blurred yellow streaks through the rain, reflecting against the dark blue sign that read second chapter. The sign Emily had painted herself when she was 30, after the divorce that had made her feel as if her life had been folded shut in the middle of a page. She had not finished Ray. Danged. She was cleaning out the cash register drawer because the track had jammed. A small task she would normally have left until morning. But that night, she did not want to go upstairs to the apartment above the shop too soon. Daniel had just texted that he would come by late. He said there were a few things he wanted to talk about. Nothing bad, he added immediately afterward, as if even he could hear the frightening emptiness between those two sentences. Emily had looked at that message many times throughout the day, while making coffee for customers, while rearranging the old fiction shelf, while smiling at a 10-year-old boy who asked whether ghost stories could really give people nightmares. A few things he wanted to talk about, a simple sentence, but after 2 years of loving a man so gentle that he had made her lower her guard, Emily had learned that sometimes the simplest sentences were where the truth stood waiting, one hand resting on the doorknob. She pulled the drawer out too hard, and a stack of receipts spilled onto the floor. When she bent down to pick them up, she noticed the bottom of the drawer sitting slightly uneven. Beneath the thin layer of wood, something was caught. One curled corner of old brown paper lifted by the damp. She used the old letter opener to pry it loose, and the envelope slid out like something that had lain still for a very long time, but had never really died. There was no recipient's name, only a smeared ink mark in the corner. And when Emily opened it, inside was a copy of a large donation check that had saved second chapter from closing a year earlier. She remembered that money. She remembered the morning the bank called, remembered standing behind the counter with one hand gripping the edge of the wood, remembered her tears falling onto the rent invoice, because an anonymous community fund had sent exactly the amount she needed to keep the shop alive for another 12 months. She remembered Daniel holding her while she cried, his voice low and warm, telling her that maybe people had seen the meaning in what she was doing. But the sender on the copy was not a community fund. It was Hayes' private holdings. The name Hayes made the whole shop seem to lose its warmth in a single second. Hayes was not just a name. Hayes was the name her mother had once been unable to hear without needing to sit down. Hayes was the name printed on the investment contracts that had turned her father from a proud man into a man who died quietly in bitterness. Hayes was the name Emily had buried beneath years of work. Divorce, opening the shop, making coffee, shelving books, telling herself her life had moved into its second chapter. Just then, the bell above the door rang. Daniel stepped in out of the rain, his black coat wet at the shoulders, dark hair touched with a few beads of water. His face still the face that had made her believe in safety after too many years of having to protect herself. He saw the envelope in her hand. He did not ask what it was. He did not frown like someone who did not know. He stopped in the entryway, rainwater dripping onto the wooden floor, and only said, "Emily, let me explain." In that moment, everything beautiful between them did not break with a sound. It quietly changed its meaning. Their first meeting in the rain, the book he had chosen, the times he had appeared exactly when she needed him. The money that saved the shop, the key to the little house he had given her. The late dinners after closing, even the way he looked at her as if she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, all of it turned back toward her at once, no longer memories but evidence. 2 years earlier, Emily Carter had believed she was no longer the kind of woman who could let a man walk into her life and overturn everything. She had once believed too much when she was younger, believed in a short marriage to Lucas Grant, a man whose voice was always so calm that every feeling she placed beside him seemed excessive. Lucas was the kind of man who never slammed doors, never shouted, never did anything bad enough for outsiders to stand fully on her side. He only sighed when she talked about her dream of opening a bookstore, only raised his eyebrows when she bought another box of old novels while their account was not exactly full. only said in a tired voice that Emily always fell in love with a story before checking the facts. When they divorced, Lucas left her with the rented apartment, a few boxes of belongings, a cold silence, and one sentence that clung longer than the court papers. "You don't love real people, Emily. You love the version you need to believe in." She hated him for that sentence for years, but it also made her afraid of herself. Because before Lucas, before that marriage, before she even knew love could be a beautiful room without an exit, her father had died because of a story he had once believed. Harold Carter had been the kind of man who entered a room with a loud laugh, his shirt sleeves always rolled up, his hands smelling faintly of pine because he liked fixing things around the house himself, even when their family had enough money to hire someone. He invested almost all of the family's savings in a deal led by Robert Hayes, a name that shone in Portland's investment circles back then. A man who spoke about the future, development funds, long-term returns and opportunities meant only for people brave enough to step forward. Harold believed him, not only with money. He made Margaret, his wife, believe. He made Emily, then 14, believe through dinners where he sketched out summer vacations, college tuition, a larger house, a future without the fear of every bill. Then the deal collapsed. The money disappeared into shell companies. The paperwork became tangled. Lawyers said suing would cost more than what they had left. Robert Hayes never went to prison, only vanished from the city after protecting what he needed to protect. Harold Carter protected nothing. The house was lost. Emily's mother had a mild stroke a few years later. Her father picked up odd jobs, grew quieter, drank more black coffee than alcohol, but always had eyes as red as a drunk man's. He died when Emily was 22, not immediately after the deal, not in a way that could be written into any file as having been killed by Hayes. But in the slow way, a man dies when he cannot forgive himself for leading his family into a trap. So when Emily opened second chapter after her divorce, she was not just opening a bookstore. She was building a small place to prove there were chapters in a life a person could rewrite with her own hands, without a man promising a future, without an investment fund, without anyone coming to save her. Every morning she opened the door at 7, turned on the lights along each shelf, ground the coffee beans, wrote the day's quote in white chalk on the blackboard, wiped down the table by the window where regulars liked to sit, and told herself that this piece, though small, was real. A little bookstore might never make her rich, but it did not lie to her. If the rain kept customers away, sales were low. If the machine broke, she had to pay for the repair. If the rent went up, she had to find a way to manage. Life at second chapter was rough, tiring, but clear. Clear was what Emily had learned to love after too many years, living in the aftermath of beautiful promises. Daniel Hayes walked into the shop on a rainy afternoon in March, bringing with him the cold smell of the street and a warmth that later made Emily hate her own memory for preserving too many beautiful details. He pushed the door open close to 5 o'clock, when the rain was coming down so thickly that the last customer had just run out, shouting to her that Portland really was the city of shoes that never dried. The doorbell gave a small ring. Emily was behind the counter, wiping the rainwater customers had tracked onto the floor, her hair loosely tied, the sleeves of her sweater pushed up. The man who stepped in had dark brown hair wet at the temples, a charcoal coat, gray-blue eyes that looked tired but bright, a face not too perfect, but the kind that made a person want to believe he could listen without preparing his answer in advance. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and a little shy. "I'm just trying to get out of the rain for a minute, if you don't mind." Emily answered with the habit of a bookseller. "We usually charge for shelter from the rain by making people pretend to care about a book." He laughed, not loudly, but genuinely enough to warm the room. He moved along the shelves, not skimming the books like someone only waiting for the rain to ease, but lightly touching the spines, reading titles, stopping before the old fiction shelf. At last he pulled down a worn copy of East of Eden. Emily looked at the book and smiled before she could keep her face neutral. "My father loved that one," she said. "He used to say there are some books you shouldn't read too young, because when you're young you only see the story, but later you start seeing the wound." Daniel looked at her a second too long. At the time, she thought it was empathy. Later, she understood it was recognition. "Your father sounds like a serious reader," he said. "He used to be." Emily answered more briefly than usual, because there were doors in her life she did not open for new customers. Daniel did not press. He only asked her to recommend another book for someone who liked stories about family, guilt, and second chances. She gave him another novel, And they talked about books, about the rainy city, about people who read not to escape life, but to have enough language to keep living inside. He did not flirt loudly. He did not ask for her number. He did not call her beautiful in the way men did when they wanted to shorten the distance. He bought 2 books and a black coffee, sat by the window until the rain lightened, and before leaving, he looked at the notice board for the children's reading program and said, "You host this on Saturdays every month, right?" Emily was a little surprised. "You saw that on the board?" He only smiled and pointed at the blue flyer. "Yeah, I saw it. That flyer listed this month's date. It did not mention previous months, but at the time, Emily did not notice, or maybe she noticed, and quickly placed it into the drawer of charming things. A man who read carefully, a man who remembered details, a man who walked in because of the rain and stayed because of the story. That was how a small lie dressed itself in the shape of destiny. Daniel returned the following week. Then the week after that, then became part of a rhythm Emily did not realize she had begun to look forward to. He always seemed to appear on the days. The shop needed a little kindness at exactly the right time. When the coffee machine made a frightening choking sound, and she was standing in front of it with a screwdriver in her hand, Daniel walked in, took off his coat, and asked if she needed someone who at least knew the difference between a water pipe and an electrical wire. He did not fix it for her in the way men did when they wanted to prove they were useful. He sat beside her, held the flashlight, read instructions on his phone, let her turn the final screw herself, then said solemnly that he would tell everyone she had just saved a dying creature from an industrial death. When the awning leaked and water dripped directly onto the discount shelf, he held a bucket while she moved the books, his shirt wet in one wide patch, still joking that a bookstore without a leak was too lacking in Gothic atmosphere. When a supplier sent the wrong invoice, she frowned over it at the cash register while he only bought coffee, sat quietly, and did not interrupt until she put down the pen herself, then said, "You seem like someone who hates being helped before you've had a chance to try." She looked at him, startled by how true it was. "And you seem like someone who watches too much." "I read," he answered. "Bad habit." The notes he left in old books slowly became something private between them. Not love letters, just small sentences written on yellow sticky notes. "Page 82 has a line you won't like but will think about all day. This one pretends to be about war, but it's really about people who don't know how to apologize. I think the bookseller hides her favorite books on the lower shelves, so only the people who really bend down can find them." Emily kept those notes in a tin box beneath the counter, telling herself she kept them because they were fun, not because each time she opened it, her heart softened. Mia Reynolds, her best friend, a family lawyer with curly hair and the ability to spot a problem before the problem introduced itself, was not so easily blurred by Daniel. One evening, as the two of them ate noodles in the small office behind the shop, Mia looked through the glass door at Daniel sitting by the window reading. "He's a little too perfect to be accidental." Emily laughed, twirling noodles around her fork. "You say that like kindness is evidence of a crime. No, I'm saying kindness that arrives at the right time over and over should have its source checked." "Mia, I know. I'm a lawyer, so I'm not allowed to enjoy things." Emily looked at Daniel. He had just lifted his head, caught her eye, and smiled very faintly, as if they already had some warm secret between them. "Maybe life is just being kind this time," Emily said. Mia did not argue anymore, but her eyes did not let go. Love grew through small things, and it was precisely the small things that made Emily believe. If Daniel had entered her life with expensive flowers, elegant restaurants, and grand promises, she might have been afraid. But he loved her through evenings after closing, when Portland rained against the glass, when she counted the money in the register and he stacked chairs. He learned to make cappuccino without too much foam because she hated wasting milk. He remembered which regular liked to sit near the outlet, remembered that a little girl named Rosie loved books about dragons but was afraid of covers where the dragon looked too fierce, remembered that her mother in the nursing home liked lavender but was allergic to lilies. The first time Emily told him about her father, only a small piece, on a night when they ate hot soup in the office after the power had gone out in the shop for 2 hours. She said Harold Carter had once read aloud to her when the rain was too loud and thunder scared her. Daniel did not ask for her father's full name. He did not need to ask. He already knew. But at the time, Emily only saw his silence as respect. He said, "It sounds like he gave you a place to hide inside books." Emily looked down at her bowl of soup. "And then later he lost almost everything except the books." Daniel said nothing for a few seconds. "I'm sorry. You didn't do anything." Emily said it, and if life had any mercy, it should have made Daniel tell the truth right then. But Daniel only looked at her with a sadness she mistook for sympathy. Later, she would remember that look and understand. There had also been guilt inside. He knew Harold's name. He knew Robert Hayes. He knew that deal had not been a simple business accident the way the old papers had written it. He knew his father had won by letting other people lose complete, but he still held his spoon, sitting in the small room of the bookstore, letting the daughter of the family his father had destroyed believe he was simply a man falling in love with her because of who she was. And the most painful part was that he really was falling in love with her. The truth does not always stand opposite a lie. Sometimes they live inside the same person, touching each other every night, making that person gentler and more cruel at the same time. The first time Emily took Daniel to visit Margaret Carter at the nursing home, it was raining too, but more thinly, drifting across the car windows like breath. Margaret was in her 60s, and after her mild stroke several years earlier, her memory had days when it was very clear and days when it became mixed up like a bookshelf someone had mislabeled. She lived in the last room on the second-floor hallway, where a window looked down over an old maple tree. Emily brought lavender, and Daniel brought a box of oatmeal cookies from the shop, the kind Margaret liked. At first, everything went gently. Margaret held Daniel's hand, thanked him for taking care of Emily, asked what he did for work. Daniel said he worked in social investment advising, trying to choose projects that did some good rather than only producing profit. Emily thought that sounded beautiful, not knowing he had learned how to speak about money in the language of atonement. Margaret looked at him for a long time, so long that Emily had to laugh softly. "Mom, you're scaring him." But Margaret did not laugh. Her hand trembled on the blanket. "I've seen those eyes before," she said. Daniel went pale for a moment so brief that Emily might have missed it if she had not been watching him. Then he smiled, bent down, and took Margaret's hand. "Maybe I just have a common face." Margaret slowly shook her head. "No, not the face. The eyes." Emily touched her mother's shoulder. "You're tired, Mom." Margaret looked at Emily as if she wanted to say something, but could not find a path through the fog in her mind. Daniel stepped outside to take a call a few minutes later, or pretended to. As soon as he left the room, Margaret gripped Emily's hand with surprising strength. "Don't let the Hayes family back into your life." Emily froze. "What did you say?" "Hayes." Her voice was hoarse, her eyes frightened. "I saw those eyes in Robert. Not the same face, the same way of looking when they already know more than you do." Emily gently pulled her hand back, her heart beating fast. "You're confused, Mom. Daniel's last name is Hayes, but Hayes is a common name." She lied to herself before she had any proof against what her mother had said. When Daniel came back, Margaret had gone quiet, her face turned toward the window. On the drive home, he drove slowly because of the rain. "Your mother seemed worried," he said. "She has days like that." Emily watched the drops running down the glass. "Have you ever met my mother before?" Daniel glanced at her. "No. Why do you ask?" "Nothing. Nothing can be the place where a person buries an entire town." Emily said it because she wanted to keep that day beautiful. Daniel let her keep it. That was both their guilt, though not in equal measure. The donation that saved second chapter came during the winter of the following year, when the landlord raised the rent with a falsely regretful tone and an email attached to a market rate comparison chart. The bookstore was living on narrow margins. The children's reading program did not make money but gave Emily a reason not to give up. And the coffee paid the electricity more than the books did. She had started thinking about closing. She did not tell Daniel right away. She did not tell Mia. She sat alone in the shop after closing, going over each column of numbers, covering her face with her hand when she realized she might have to sell all the shelves, give up the space, and go manage some soulless chain bookstore if they were still hiring. Second chapter, the name that had once been her promise that life could be rewritten, suddenly looked like a sentence too naive on the blue sign. Daniel found out not because she told him, but because he had seen the sign. He saw the bills turned face down, saw her skipping meals, saw her recalculating muffin prices, saw the half-beat delay in her smile with customer. "You're hiding something from me," he said one night as they closed the shop. Emily leaned back against the counter. "I don't want to turn you into someone who has to save me. I don't want you turning me into someone standing outside while you're drowning." That sentence made her cry. She told him. He held her, let her cry into his sweater, did not offer a solution right away. The fact that he did not offer a solution right away made her believe He was not the kind of man who wanted to buy control with money. 2 weeks later, the bank called, a donation from an anonymous community fund, enough to cover the raised rent, repair the roof, and maintain the children's program. Emily stood behind the counter, her hands shaking, unable to hold back tears. She called Daniel. He arrived within 20 minutes, held her in the middle of the bookstore, and smiled as if the miracle had surprised him too. "Maybe people have seen that what you're doing matters," he said. Emily looked up at him. "Do you know anything about this?" He looked at her for 1 second. "I know you deserve to be helped." The answer was not a denial, but she received it as tenderness. That night, she left the front lights on longer than usual. People passing by saw Emily and Daniel sitting on the floor between boxes of books, eating cold pizza, and talking about adding shelves to the children's section. Emily thought that was the night life repaid her. Daniel thought that was the night he repaired one very small part of the past. They were both wrong in ways that would hurt them. Mia began investigating not because she hated Daniel, but because she loved Emily enough not to believe in a miracle without an invoice. She asked to see the paperwork for the donation. Emily refused at first, then grew irritated, then angry. They argued in the small office behind the shop, between the smell of printer paper, slightly burnt coffee, and rain tapping on the roof. "A gift without a name can still have strings," Mia said, her hand on the folder. Emily stood by the desk, her eyes red from sleeplessness, and from relief she had waited too long to feel. "Can't you let me be happy for once? I'm trying to make sure you get to be happy without someone pulling wires. Not every good man is a contract that needs reviewing." Mia pressed her lips together. "I'm not saying Daniel is bad. I'm saying he knows too much, arrives too perfectly, and now a large amount of money falls out of the sky exactly when your shop is dying. I would feel guilty if I didn't ask." Emily said something she regretted the moment it left her mouth. "Maybe you're just so used to seeing broken families that you don't recognize it when someone actually wants to help." Mia's face changed, not into loud anger, just hurt. "Maybe," she said, "but at least I don't mistake wanting to help for the right to interfere." Mia left. Emily did not call after her. 3 days later, Mia sent a short message. "I'm sorry I made you feel attacked, but I'll still look into the source of the fund if you let me." Emily did not answer. This was one of the moments she would later remember with a private shame. Daniel did not need to separate her from Mia. His lie only needed to make Emily want to protect the dream so badly that she pushed the warning voice away by herself. A love built on a wrong foundation does not only wound a person when the truth comes out, it quietly rearranges loyalties long before that. A year after the donation, Daniel gave Emily a key instead of a ring. It was a September morning, one of the rare clear ones, and Portland had that soft, golden light over the trees beginning to change color. He walked her through the neighborhood 4 blocks from the bookstore and stopped in front of a small blue-gray house with a wooden porch, windows facing a row of maples, and a backyard large enough for herbs and a few reading chairs. Emily thought he was only showing her a pretty house. Daniel took a key from his pocket and placed it in her palm. "I bought it," he said. She looked at him, not understanding at first. "You bought a house?" "Yeah. It isn't big. It isn't perfect. The roof needs work. The kitchen is old. But I thought it had a path that could pass by your shop every morning." That sentence struck the softest place in her. Not a proposal, not a grand promise, just an ordinary image. Every morning he could pass by second chapter, wave through the glass. They could live near each other. No more nights of him driving back to a distant apartment. "I'm not trying to pressure you," Daniel said quickly when he saw her silence. "I just want you to know I'm thinking about a life with you in it. Not as an idea, as a route, a kitchen, a key, a roof that needs repairing." Emily cried. He held her on the porch. If anyone had asked her then whether she was happy, she would have said yes without thinking. But when she asked whether his family knew he had bought a house in Portland, Daniel paused very slightly. "My father's gone. My mother lives in Arizona. I don't have much family left." "You don't talk about them much," she said. "My family past is complicated." "Complicated how?" He looked at the house, not at her. "There are things I'm not proud of." She placed a hand on his cheek. "I don't need you to be perfect." He closed his eyes and leaned into her hand. "I know," but he did not tell her. The key lay in Emily's palm, warming against her skin, becoming another promise resting on a truth withheld. Daniel wanted to build a future beside her, but he still would not show her where the front door of the past was. Lucas Grant returned to Portland in the rainy season, as if the men who had once hurt her always knew how to choose the right weather. He entered second chapter in an expensive gray coat, his hair neat, his face still holding the calm that had once made Emily feel like she was always the one who was too emotional in every argument. She was pricing newly arrived books when the bell rang. Lucas looked around the shop, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "You actually did it." Emily set down the pen. "Are you surprised?" "No. I knew you were stubborn. Stubborn is different from capable." "True." He nodded, and the ease of his agreement irritated her more than a jab would have. Daniel stepped out from the cafe area, holding 2 cups, and saw Lucas. Emily introduced them briefly. Lucas shook Daniel's hand, and in the moment the 2 men looked at each other, something passed across Lucas's face. Not recognition in a dramatic way, but a sharp curiosity. "Hayes," Lucas said, "are you related to Robert Hayes?" Emily froze, though she had told herself Hayes was common. Daniel placed the coffees down. "He was my father. He passed away." The air in the shop changed at once. Lucas looked at Emily, and she hated that look because it was not only triumphant. It was almost pitying. "You knew what?" Emily asked, but her voice was not steady. Lucas gave a soft, joyless laugh. "Emily, you're still the same. You fall in love with the story before checking the truth." Daniel stepped closer. "You don't have the right to talk to her like that." Lucas looked at him. "And what right do you have? The right to walk in here with that name?" Emily cut in, her voice cold. "Lucas, leave." He took a folded photocopy from his coat pocket and set it on the counter. "I didn't come here to ruin your little fairy tale bookstore. I'm consulting on an old file connected to Hayes. When I saw his name, I thought you should know who you're inviting behind your counter." He turned away, then stopped at the door. "You can hate me, but don't keep proving me right." When he left, Daniel and Emily stood in the thick silence between the shelves. The paper on the counter lay there like a dead animal. "Emily," Daniel said. She did not look at him. "Were you going to say anything before I opened it?" He was silent, and it was that silence that made her not open it right away. She folded the paper, tucked it into her coat pocket, as if not reading it meant the past had not yet returned. Daniel did not push her, maybe because he was afraid, maybe because he hoped she would choose not to know. That night they still closed the shop together, but every sound had changed. The keys, the cups placed back on the shelf, the rain against the glass. Everything seemed to be waiting for an answer. They were both delaying. The mismatched pieces began to rise after that, not like lightning, but like mold behind a wall, slowly, silently, spreading while people still tried to live normally. Daniel had said he first discovered second chapter because he needed shelter from the rain. But he knew far too much about the children's reading program. He had said he did not know much about Portland before coming there. But an antique shop owner nearby recognized him when Emily and Daniel stopped in to buy an old shelf. "You're the man who asked for a map of this neighborhood last year, aren't you?" the man said. Daniel smiled and answered vaguely that maybe he was mistaken. Last year was before their first rainy day. Daniel had said the donation probably came from a community that loved the bookstore. But every time Emily mentioned wanting to find the donor to thank them, he gently changed the subject. He remembered the anniversary of her father's death after she had only mentioned it once, which had once made her feel loved, but now made her wonder where he had learned that date. Her mother had said, "Don't let the Hayes family back into your life," and Daniel had said she was confused. But when Emily later told Mia after the 2 of them had tentatively made peace, Mia asked, "If she was confused, why did he go pale?" Emily hated the question because it was right. She began sleeping less, reading old messages, digging through memories, like reaching into a drawer full of needles. Some of Daniel's sentences changed meaning. "I just want to understand the place where you survived. If someone wanted to help you and you didn't know who they were, would you accept? Sometimes a wrong beginning doesn't mean everything afterward is wrong." When he had said those things, she had heard them as philosophy. Now they sounded like arguments prepared in advance. One night, Emily opened the paper Lucas had given her. She did it in the kitchen of the apartment above the shop, under a yellow light, rain striking the window, a glass of water beside her hand. The paper was old, the photocopy unclear, but it showed enough. Her father standing beside Robert Hayes at an investment signing 20 years earlier. Harold Carter looked younger in the photo, shoulders straight, smiling with the trust of a man who did not yet know what he would lose. Robert Hayes stood beside him, one hand resting on the back of a chair, his eyes facing the camera with the confidence of a man used to winning. And behind them, blurred near the edge of the photo, stood a boy of about 16, with dark brown hair and gray-blue eyes. No one needed to write the name. Emily recognized the eyes immediately. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She did not bend down to pick it up. She sat still, staring at the photo, feeling as if the whole apartment had tilted. Daniel did not only carry the Hayes name. He had once stood on the edge of her family's story, long before she knew he existed. Her mother had not been confused. The meeting in the rain was no longer a meeting in the rain. It was a man stepping out of an old photograph, walking through 20 years of silence, choosing her bookstore and saying, "I'm just trying to get out of the rain." When Emily confronted Daniel for the first time, she did not shout. That frightened him more. She asked him to come after closing, but she did not make coffee, did not turn on the jazz music she usually played, did not light the shop warmly. There was only the light above the counter, the old newspaper, and the enlarged photo on the table. Daniel stepped in, saw the photo, and his face spoke before his mouth did. Emily stood behind the counter, her hand resting on the wooden surface where they had eaten pizza, laughed, kissed between boxes of books. "You were there," she said. Daniel stared at the photo for a long time. "I was 16. I didn't ask how old you were. I said you were there. I didn't understand anything about that deal at the time. But later you did." He was silent. She nodded as if she had just received a number in a ledger. "Was the first day you walked into my shop an accident?" Daniel closed his eyes. "At first, no." Those 3 words opened a space inside Emily so wide that she had to grip the counter. Daniel stepped toward her, but stopped when he saw her move half a step back. "Emily, listen to me. At first I looked for you because I knew what my father had done. After he died, I went through old files. I saw Harold Carter's name. I saw your family. I saw second chapter. I only wanted to know how you were living. I never meant to come into your life like this. But you did. I know. You told me you were getting out of the rain. It really was raining that day." The sentence was almost stupid, and they both knew it. Emily laughed once without humor. "That's the part you decided to keep true." Daniel's eyes reddened. "Everything after that was real." This was the central sentence of the tragedy, falling between them like something heavy. "I really love you. I didn't fake those nights here. I didn't fake caring for your mother. I didn't fake wanting to live near the shop. I just didn't know how to tell you without losing you." Emily looked at him, and it hurt because she believed part of it. She believed he loved her. That made everything more cruel. "You didn't know how to tell me," she repeated, "so you decided to let me love you first. That's not what it was. Then what was it? I was afraid if I told you right away, you'd never give me a chance." "Exactly," Emily said, her voice breaking for the first time. "Maybe I wouldn't have given you a chance. That was the right you took from me." Daniel looked at her as if that sentence finally made him understand that he was not being accused of a simple lie, but of rearranging the entrance to her heart and calling it love. He cried, but his tears did not soften her the way they once had. Or rather, they softened her and angered her at the same time. She hated herself for still wanting to wipe his face. Mia brought the full evidence 3 days later, in a gray folder placed on the counter at second chapter. Emily had called to apologize in a hoarse voice and said, "You were right. But please don't say that sentence." Mia came immediately, hugged her longer than usual, then worked like a lawyer because that was how she loved people when they were breaking. The files showed the donation had been transferred through a small consulting company, which ultimately connected back to Hayes' private holding. There was a copy of an email Daniel had sent to a lawyer asking how to transfer money without direct disclosure to recipient. Without disclosing it directly to the recipient. There was an invoice for a consultant hired to research the finances of a small business, someone who had gathered lease reports, vendor debt, and estimated revenue for second chapter before Daniel ever walked into the shop. There were notes about the children's reading program, a map of the neighborhood, a photo of the front of second chapter taken months before their first meeting. Nothing in it proved Daniel had wanted to hurt her. That was exactly what made Emily feel sick. If he had been a cold predator, she could have hated him cleanly. But the papers showed a man full of guilt, trying to help, trying to approach, trying to control the damage. And in doing so, turning her life into a project of atonement before it became love. Mia sat across from her, not touching the folder. "I know you love him." Emily looked at the documents. "I still love him. I know. I hate that. Love is not evidence that he was right." Emily held the email Daniel had sent the lawyer. "He saved the shop. He interfered with the shop without letting you know. If it weren't for that money, I would have lost second chapter. And because you didn't know, you never got to decide whether to lose the shop or accept money from the Hayes family. That sentence struck the center of everything. Emily sat still for a long time. She had not only been lied to about a rainy day, she had been robbed of a whole series of choices she thought were hers. The choice to trust Daniel, the choice to accept help, the choice to let him meet her mother, the choice to dream about the little house near the shop. Everything had happened in a room where he knew there was a hidden door, and she did not. That night, Daniel came and stood outside the shop in the rain. Emily watched him through the glass. He did not knock right away. Maybe he saw her inside. Maybe he knew there was now too much paperwork between them for a glass door to be only a glass door. At last, he placed his hand on the door. She did not open it. He stood there for almost 10 minutes, then left. The rain erased the mark of his hand from the glass. Emily stood in the dark shop, clutching the folder to her chest. And for the first time, second chapter no longer felt completely like a refuge. The lie had crossed the threshold, had sat beside the window, had learned how to make coffee, had straightened the shelves, had saved the shop, had kissed her among the smell of old paper. No corner remained untouched. The days that followed were the heavy middle Emily did not know how to escape. She still had to open the shop at 7. Customers still came for coffee, asked about new books, complained about the weather. The children still came to the Saturday reading program. And Rosie still asked when Uncle Daniel would come back to do the dragon voice, because he made the funniest sad dragon voice. Emily had to smile and say Uncle Daniel was busy. Another little boy asked whether Uncle Daniel and Miss Emily had had a fight, because last time he said he would bring cookies. Children's questions have a way of touching the place adults do not dare to name. Emily stopped sleeping well, forgot to eat, poured almond milk into the wrong regular's coffee, placed poetry books on the mystery shelf. She hated Daniel in the morning when she looked at the envelope, missed him in the afternoon when the rain began, wanted to call him at night when the coffee machine made a strange sound again. Hurt does not move in a straight line. Some days she was certain she could never see him again. Some days she wondered whether, if everything after the lie had been real, people might rebuild by telling the whole truth. Some days she was angry at Mia, because the evidence was too clear. Some days she was angry at her mother for recognizing him too early and not being able to explain it clearly. Some days she was angry at Lucas because his bitter sentence sounded like prophecy. Then she was angriest at herself because she had seen signs. Daniel knew too much. He avoided too gracefully. He hurt in all the right places, and she had called it attentiveness, empathy, a miracle, because she needed a story in which the past had finally sent her a good man to make up for the bad man who had destroyed her family. One evening, she took out the tin box of Daniel's notes. She read them one by one. This one is about people who don't know how to apologize. I think the bookseller hides her favorite books on the lower shelves so only the people who really bend down can find them. Sometimes the second chapter begins before we know the first one has ended. She had once loved that sentence. Now she almost hated it. Her second chapter had been bookmarked by someone else before she even knew it. She threw the whole box into the trash, then 10 minutes later dug it back out and sat on the floor crying because she could not hate everything that had once helped her live. Daniel fought back with love, and that made him more dangerous than if he had fought back with anger. He wrote her a letter by hand, not long, not trying to be literary the way she feared he might. He said he knew he was wrong. He said he was not asking her to forgive him immediately, only asking her to look at the whole truth, not only the first page. He said he had loved her before he knew how to stop, that every time he wanted to tell her, he saw her smiling in the shop, saw her mother holding his hand, saw her asleep against his shoulder after a long day, and he was cowardly enough to choose one more day of not breaking it. He said his father had left money, property, shares, and a shadow he did not know how to step out of. He had thought that if he used that money to save the things his father had once damaged, the world might balance a little. He wrote, "I mistook atonement for honesty." Emily read the letter twice, then folded it. Daniel came to see her afterward in the shop, with Mia standing in the corner like a quiet guard. "I didn't use you," Daniel said, his voice hoarse. "I need you to know that." Emily stood behind the counter. "You used my story to process your guilt." He shook his head, wounded. "No. At first maybe I was thinking about my father, about what he did. But I love you. You know I love you." "I know." That made him go still. "Then why isn't that love enough for you to let me fix this?" Emily looked at him. "Because you still think the problem is that I doubt the love." "I don't. I doubt the foundation." Daniel covered his face with one hand. "I can return the money. I can make everything public. I can talk to your mother. I can sell the house. I'll do anything. Now, yes now, after I found out. I know. No, Daniel, you don't know yet. She stepped out from behind the counter, holding the copy of the lawyer email. You can't give me back the first moment. You can't give me back the Emily standing in this shop on that rainy day. The one who should have known the man walking in was not a customer escaping the rain, but the son of Robert Hayes. You can't give me back the right to say no before my heart said yes. Daniel truly cried. Mia turned her face away. Emily cried too, but still went on. I don't need you to prove that everything afterward was real. The cruelest thing is that I know it was real, but afterward cannot save the beginning. Emily went to the nursing home to see Margaret on a rare sunny morning. She brought lavender, a new scarf, and the old photograph. She did not know what she wanted. Confirmation, forgiveness, someone older than her to say she was not foolish. Margaret was unusually clear that day, her eyes bright, her voice weak but steady. She looked at the photo of Harold Carter beside Robert Hayes, her finger touching her husband's face on the old paper. Your father smiled like that before everything fell apart, she said. Emily sat beside the bed, her throat tight. Did you hate him? Dad, Margaret was silent for a long time. Outside the window, leaves moved lightly in the wind. There were years when I thought I did. Not because of the money. Money is the easy thing to name. I was angry because he made me believe with him. When the truth came out, he didn't only lose money. He lost the right to trust his own judgment. The most painful thing wasn't being deceived. It was realizing he had pulled the people he loved into that belief with him. Emily closed her eyes. The sentence went straight into the place she feared most. If she stayed with Daniel too easily, was she forcing herself to keep living inside a wrong story, just to avoid admitting she had trusted the wrong one again? Would she turn second chapter? Her mother, Mia, even her father's memory into a stage where she tried to prove that love could still defeat the truth simply because she could not bear having once again fallen in love with the wrong story. Margaret placed her hand over Emily's. Does that man love you? Yes, Emily said, and cried because the answer did not help. Do you love him? Yes, Margaret nodded, her eyes sad. Forgiveness belongs to the heart. Living with someone belongs to your life. Emily lowered her head onto her mother's hand. This was not advice to leave or stay. It was worse. It gave the choice back to her, the very thing Daniel had taken away. And choosing with the whole truth in hand always hurts more than living inside a dream. The payoff happened at second chapter, where the lie had begun and where Emily decided the truth had to stand beneath the same light that had once made everything look warmer. She texted Daniel to come after closing on a rainy night. Not for drama, because in Portland, the biggest things in her life seemed always to happen when rain was falling. She wiped down the long table in the middle of the shop, the table once used for book club, children's workshops, a local author signing, and the nights she and Daniel had eaten soup together. Then she placed each piece of evidence on it slowly, like laying out the chapters of a book no one wanted to read but had to finish. A copy of East of Eden Daniel bought on the first day, the old newspaper with the photo of both fathers, the copy of the check from Hayes Private Holdings, the email he had sent the lawyer, the invoice for the financial research into the shop, the photo of second chapter's storefront taken before he escaped the rain, the key to the Lee TTLE house near the shop, his apology letter. When Daniel walked in, he stopped at the door. He looked at the table. Emily saw his face change. I want you to look at the whole story, she said. Not the part you like, not the part you call afterward. All of it. Daniel took off his coat and hung it over a chair. He moved closer like a man, walking into his own hospital room. I know, he said. No. Tonight you listen. She pointed to the book. You came in because of the rain. That was the story you gave me. She pointed to the photo. You knew me before that? She pointed to the check. You saved my shop without letting me know who was saving it. She pointed to the email. You asked a lawyer how to hide it. She pointed to the key. You gave me a future before giving me the past. Daniel sat down, his hands clasped together, his eyes red. I didn't know how to escape my father's name, so you placed it into my life without telling me. I wanted to repair something. You wanted to repair it without being seen holding the part that was dirty. That made him lower his head. Emily did not raise her voice. Her calm made each sentence heavier. I believe you love me. I believe the nights you spent here were real. I believe you helped me not because you wanted to own me, but because you thought it was a way to make amends. I believe when you gave me that key, you imagined a real life. Daniel looked up, hope crossing his face like a painful reflex. Emily saw it, and it hurt to have to put it out. But I cannot live inside a love where the first page was torn out and rewritten by the other person. I can write it differently from now on, Daniel said, his voice breaking. We can start over, no hiding, no anonymous money, no half-truths. Emily looked around the bookstore, the wooden shelves, the yellow light, the rain-clouded glass door. You still think starting over is something we can choose after everything has been exposed? That's not what I mean. Then what is it? It's that I love you. That sentence had once been her shelter. Now it was something she had to walk through. Love does not give me back the moment when I should have known the truth before loving you. Daniel offered everything, and every offer was sincere, late, and helpless. He would return control of the money. He would sign documents turning the donation into a transparent fund. He would sell the house. He would meet Margaret and apologize. He would give Mia every old Hayes file to see whether there were other families his father had harmed. He would leave Portland if Emily wanted. He would stay if she wanted. He would do anything. Emily listened, her heart breaking in a way that drew no blood, because this was the Daniel she loved. The man willing to bend down and pick up every piece. The man who did not run when he was seen. The man who, if he had come to her with the truth from the beginning, might have been the greatest love of her life without poison in it. I don't want you to disappear, she said. I also don't know how to let you stay, he cried silently. Do you forgive me? That question hung between them for a long time. Emily thought of her father, her mother, the bookstore, the first rainy day. All the times Daniel had made her laugh when she thought she had forgotten how. The brown envelope, the lawyer email, the choices taken from her by gentle hands. Maybe someday, she said, in my heart, but not by continuing. Daniel closed his eyes as if struck. You still love me? She did not deny it. Yes, then why? Because I don't want to use love to step over myself. They held each other one last time among the old bookshelves. Not the embrace of people who had stopped loving, not the embrace of complete forgiveness. It was the embrace of two people standing in the ruins of something once beautiful, knowing that if they held on a little longer, they would begin calling the collapse a home. Daniel buried his face in her hair and said he was sorry again and again, quietly, like a prayer that did not expect an answer. Emily held onto his shirt, let herself cry. Let herself love him for those final few minutes without turning love into a decision. When he left, the bell above the door rang once. The shop returned to silence. Emily stood beside the table full of evidence, her hands cold, understanding that victory did not feel like release. Sometimes victory was only having enough strength left not to betray yourself one more time. A year later, second chapter was still open. But it was no longer the same bookstore in Emily's eyes. And Emily was no longer the same woman who had painted its name in blue with the simple belief that a second chapter meant everything after breaking would be better. On the wall beside the counter was a small plaque with the name of the new fund, the Harold Carter Community Reading Fund, created from the money that had once come from Hayes' private holdings, now transparent, governed by a board made up of Emily, Mia, and two local business owners. Part of the fund supported the children's reading program, and part went to families harmed by fraudulent investment deals, if they could be found and agreed to accept. Daniel signed every document that needed signing. He did not take credit. He did not appear at the small announcement. He did not send flowers. He only sent, through his lawyer, an envelope with a note that read, "For the truth this should have had from the beginning." Emily read it and placed it in the file, not in a private box. Margaret had days when she remembered Daniel and days when she did not. Once she asked where the sad-eyed man had gone, and Emily said he did not come anymore, and Margaret nodded as if she understood, then asked whether it was raining. Mia still came by the shop, still sat at the table by the window, sometimes saying nothing for hours so Emily would know she did not have to fill every wound with conversation. Lucas sent a short email after hearing what had happened, writing that he was sorry he had been right in a cruel way. Emily did not answer, but she did not delete it either. Some debts do not need to be collected, only kept from managing your life. Daniel sent one final letter at the end of autumn, almost exactly on the anniversary of the day they had stood before the blue-gray house. He wrote that he was not asking to come back, that he had begun working with a legal team to reopen some of his father's old files, that he did not know how much good it could do after so many years, but he did not want his guilt to keep disguising itself as private sorrow. He wrote that he hoped one day Emily could remember their love without feeling that the whole of it had been a betrayal. Emily read the letter after closing, rain falling beyond the glass. She cried, but not the way she had before. She folded the letter and placed it inside an old book on a high shelf, not burning it, not returning it. She no longer hated Daniel. That was the most painful part. If she hated him, she could tell the story more easily. She could say he was a liar, She was a victim, and love had been a mistake. But the truth would not give her that clean version. Daniel had truly loved her. He had truly made her laugh. He had truly saved the shop. He had truly sat beside her mother with a gentle hand. He had also truly lied, truly controlled, truly taken away her right to choose. One person can be both shelter and fire. Emily learned that at the cost of the softest part of herself. On another rainy afternoon, the bell above the door at second chapter rang, while Emily was writing a new quote on the blackboard. A strange man stepped in, hair wet, dark coat damp, a little embarrassed, and said, "I'm just trying to get out of the rain for a minute, if you don't mind." Emily stood still for half a second. The sentence moved through her like an old shadow, making her heart tighten but not knocking her down. Then she smiled, polite, not too warm, not too cold. "You can get out of the rain," she said, "but if you stay too long, you have to actually buy a book." The man laughed and walked toward the shelves. Emily turned back to the blackboard. She still held the chalk. A moment later, she wrote, "Not every second chapter begins with healing. Some begin with learning where the first page was torn." She looked at the sentence, erased one word, and wrote it again more neatly. The shop still smelled of roasted coffee, old paper, cinnamon, damp coats. Rosie was a little older now, and no longer asked where Uncle Daniel had gone. The regulars still sat by the window. The rain still made Portland look like a city written in smeared ink. Emily still opened the door at 7, still closed the register after 9, still sometimes looked at the long table where she had once laid out all the evidence, and felt a coldness pass down her back. She kept living, but not in a way that felt light. Some loves do not die because there is not enough love. Some loves die because the truth arrives too late to turn them into a place where anyone can live. Emily no longer hated Daniel. She simply could not live in the house he had built with a false door from the very beginning. And when she locked second chapter that night, standing alone beneath the awning, listening to the rain fall, she understood that the second chapter of her life was no longer a promise that everything would be repaid. It was only the cold truth that some people survive by continuing to open the door every morning, even after they no longer believe everyone walks in because of the rain.